Y'all do realize this is 2025, right? Just making sure you knew. I don't know when I started this, but I heard this practice many years ago. I still write checks. Does anybody actually still write checks in this building? Right? So I take the checkbook and go ahead and write 2025 on the checkbook just to make sure I don't put 2024 on it, right? So I've been doing that forever, but don't have to write as many checks, so it's not as important as it used to be when I was writing a whole lot of checks. Thank you, Internet. You're saving me a lot of postage, right? That's what you're doing. So it's a new year. A new year at Covenant means that we are starting a new series. And this new series is based on arguably the most famous of all Jesus' teachings. It's called the Sermon on the Mount, but it really is not technically what most of us would think is a sermon. It's just really teachings. He was teaching people, and when you read Matthew 5, 6, and 7, there's like a number of little things, little passages that amount to a lot of stuff, I know. But we're not getting into all the chapters, 5, 6, and 7, not even all the verses, but just the first 10 of chapter 5 in Matthew. Now, this begins, I'm going to just read the first couple of verses before we get to our target verse. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. That's where the mount comes from. So there's a crowd of people following him, and it's obvious that he probably wants to get a little distance and maybe get into a place where he can actually teach them. Obviously, flat ground. There's a reason why we have tiers here, right? We have little upward things in the balcony so more people can be seen and can see stuff and be engaged. Sort of like what Jesus was, just inverted. So he was up, and more likely people were down below, but the voice carries and all that stuff. So it makes sense. But there was crowds there, so he went up the mountainside. Then the passage says his disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. So this was the disciples. When you look at the passage, it looks like just his disciples. But we had crowds. We had disciples. Crowds, disciples. At the very end of this teaching, the very last part of this teaching, the crowds were amazed at his teaching. So it's obviously they heard him. They were in a position to hear him. But he was primarily, from the way it looks, talking to his disciples. Now, I'm assuming it's more than the 12. I think Luke mentions he sent out 72. So I'm assuming between 12 and 72 of his disciples were probably closest to him. And you can imagine what those disciples are, the ones who are eager. Those are the ones that wanted to be close, make sure they wouldn't miss anything. They were close by, and that was more likely his target audience. But there was other people listening. But those closest really, really wanted to hear. They really wanted to get into it. Those were what we call the real Christians, right? Those who were really close, sitting on the front row. Jesse's only one. So, all right. So I'm going to give a little latitude. Maybe the first 3 rows, maybe the first three or four rows. But can you imagine Jesus on the mountainside? Those closest to him wanted to hear, wanted to be engaged. Then there was some further away that they probably heard of Jesus and said, I think he's got some good things to say. I want to hear it. Then you had those at the very back, very, very bottom, that were like, I'm not sure about this guy. If he says something I don't like, I'm bailing, right? Those are our back row people. That's the back. No, I'm just kidding. All right. But you had all kinds, right? You know, all kinds of people, those who were curious, those who were wanting to learn, those who were on the fringe, those who had mixed ideas about Jesus, had all these different types of people. And Jesus was teaching all of them. So this is the introduction to this message. He gets into pretty quickly. And I say it's an introduction, but it really is almost like we're using 8, but almost like this is 8 commands of this new life that we're going to be looking at, these 8 blessed. But before we get into that, we titled this series, Bless Your Heart, right? We titled this series, Bless Your Heart. And it is a Southern thing, right? I'm going to let Angela Johnson-Reyes explain it better than I can.
Well, I don't know if I have energy for the South. I don't know how to do it. Like, who stops talking first? And then somebody told me this. They were like, hey, when people say bless your heart, they can mean it in a good way or a bad way. And I was like, what? Like, how you do a bad bless? And they're like, no, trust me, sometimes that's not what they mean. So now, anytime somebody tells me, bless your heart, just to be safe, I reply with, bless your heart. Yeah, I wish you would bless my heart. Bless it again. Go ahead. It's kind of like the old fighting words at church. I'm going to pray for you. Oh, that's funny because I'm already praying for you. Yeah, you've been on my prayer wall.
All right, so we know it is a Southern thing. You know, we know the difference. We know when somebody says, bless your heart, we know when they mean you're an idiot, right? We know that. And when somebody says, bless your heart, we know when they're really empathizing with us. We know that, right? If you're visiting from somewhere up north and this is the first you've heard of this, or you're watching and you've never heard this before, welcome to the South. I'm just telling you, welcome to the South. But the word we want to look at, actually we're going to put two letters at the end of it. Blessed. Blessed. Now, when somebody asks you, are you blessed? I bet there's a number of people here today that would go, are you serious? Are you serious? You're really asking me that question? Do you know what has gone on in my life? Do you know what 24 has been like? Do you know the disappointments that I've had? Do you know the frustrations that I've had? Do you know the setbacks, the issues in my relationships, the difficulty of these treatments? Do you know that? And you're asking me if I'm blessed? Many of you would say, I don't feel it. I don't feel blessed. Well, let me reassure you today. Jesus wants to bless your heart. Jesus does want to bless your heart. And when we look at this word blessed, it's not our interpretation of what this is. It's not how we feel about it in the moment or in reflection of our last year. We're going to look at this word blessed the way Jesus says it is. You see, this word blessed in the Greek is a word called makarios. Makarios. And makarios basically means you're living in a world that is free of the worldly concerns. Is free of the worldly concerns. The Greeks actually referred to the island of Cyprus as Makarios because they believed in this island that if you were on this island, you had everything that you needed. You had all the resources you needed to have a content, happy life. You never needed to leave because you were in Makarios. Why would you want to leave? I've been in Dothan since 1999. I guess I think Makarios is also the name for Dothan, right? Why would I ever leave? Jesus is telling us Jesus is telling us in this word blessed that in me you have everything that you need. You don't need to look elsewhere. Blessed is this joy and serenity and contentment in the middle of all changes in any circumstances. That's what blessed is. Can you have that? Jesus says, yes, you can. Jesus is telling us today what this blessed is all about. And he uses this word in every one of these 8 that we're going to deal with. Each of these 8 Sundays we're together, taking a break for Wild Faith Conference. So in these 8 Sundays, we're going to look at each one of these. But in every one of them, the common denominator is blessed. You can be blessed. So the first one is Matthew 5:3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And when we look at that, most of us think about heaven in only one way, right? Because every time we hear the word heaven, we automatically think that's after my earthly life is over and I am in a better place, a greater place, an awesome place. That's what most of us think about. Because if you did not think about it, you probably wouldn't be at church. Because we believe, many of us believe that should be our goal. We should be attaining heaven. We should aspire to go to heaven. And how do I get there? Right? Pastor had his little children's moment with the kids, and so the first question he asked his kids, all these children up there, who wants to go to heaven? And everybody raised their hand, except one little kid. And the pastor, asked the little boy, he said, you don't believe in heaven? He said, well, yeah, I believe in heaven. Well, why didn't you raise your hand when I said, do you want to go to heaven? He said, well, I thought you were getting a trip up right now. So we want to go, not right now. But is that what Jesus is referring to here? And I'm going to tell you there's more to this than just heaven. There's more to this than just heaven. Because Matthew is the only one when he records kingdom language, when Jesus is talking about the kingdom, Matthew uses the word heaven. You know what Mark, Luke, and John use? God. They use kingdom of God. So here's a little nuance just for your information. Matthew is writing to a Jewish audience. Jewish people, Orthodox Jewish people, don't use the name of God. They will not say it. So Matthew is making this more friendly to his audience by inserting the word heaven. But when Jesus is talking in Matthew about kingdom of heaven, and then he's talking in Mark, Luke, and John about kingdom of God, he's talking about the same thing. He's talking about the same thing. So, which leads me to ask this question, is heaven our only goal? Is heaven our only goal? It's a great goal. Yeah, we all want to go there, but is that our only goal? Is that our only goal? Have we, and this has happened, I've seen this in my life, have we been scared to heaven? That we're simply wanting to miss hell and get to heaven? Is that the only reason that we believe in heaven? Is that the only thing that we're aspiring to? Just so I'm just going to miss hell, but I want to hit heaven. Is that what we're aspiring to? If that's it, if heaven, quote unquote, is our only goal, we're missing what Jesus has for us here and now. When he talks about the kingdom of God in other places, he's talking about here and now. This is what we've been given. We've been given this space in this time and in this place. We've been given that. What are we doing with it? Because when he's talking about the kingdom, it's actually in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, where? On earth, as it is in heaven. In other words, Jesus is praying and teaching us to pray, by the way. This is a prayer that he taught us. What's up there, come down here. God, bring down here what is up there. Which means we bring God's presence and spirit into everything that we do. We bring God's presence and spirit into our thought life. We're bringing up there, down here. And if we believe up there is so great and so awesome, and that's where we want to be one day, why are we not striving to make what's up there, make what's down here look like what's up there? Because that's what we're not doing. We're not living our lives down here to make a difference so that up here will look more like what's up there. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's what we should be striving to do. And the first part of this, the first part of bringing up there, down here, is the poor in spirit. The first one that Jesus gets into. Blessed are the poor in spirit. That one's foundational. This one is foundational to all the rest of the Beatitudes, but also foundational to the rest of his teaching on the Sermon on the Mount. When he says poor in spirit, when Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, that word poor literally means you're begging. You're begging because you don't have anything. You're begging because you have to. You have no access to anything. So your only recourse is to beg. And who are you begging to? You're begging to God. This poor in spirit means that you're totally dependent on God. That's what poor in the spirit means. I'm totally dependent on you, God. And because this is the first one, I understand what's going on. It really connects to the other ones. See, when I'm dependent on God, you know what? I'm going to be able to mourn like God mourns. If I'm dependent on God, I'm going to understand what it means to be meek. When I'm dependent on God, I am going to hunger and thirst for righteousness. When I'm dependent on God, I will know how to show mercy. When I'm dependent on God, you know what? I can have a pure heart. I can have a pure heart. If I'm dependent on God, I can be a peacemaker. If I'm dependent on God, I can endure persecution and hardship. We have to understand that we are spiritually bankrupt, that we are limited. We can't save ourselves. We cannot save ourselves. We can't make it to heaven on our own. There's no way we can make it to heaven. There may be a song about a stairway there, but that don't start here. It starts with God. This, the poor in spirit, can I just confess something to you? This whole idea of being totally dependent on God, of utterly coming to God and going, it's you, God. I have nowhere else to turn for me to be the man that I want to be the husband I want to be the father I want to be. I don't know where else to turn. I must turn to you. That hit home to me a number of years ago. There were 3 or 4 of us from this church that went to a Wild at Heart boot camp. And this experience, this days that we had there was 12 teaching periods or whatever. But that was not the memorable part for me. The memorable part for me was when after every session you had time to go away. You just found a place on the retreat grounds, on the campgrounds, where you just by yourself. And it was in those moments when I was alone that I could just listen. And it was in those moments that I understood that there is no way that I will be the man that God has called me to be. The man that God has created me to be. There's no way I can do it on my own. And I needed that time for just me and God. It wasn't anybody telling me this like I'm telling you. It was just that period of time with God. And it's then that I understood that only through God could I be the godly man I was created to be. Only through God could I be the godly father. And only through God could I be the Christ-centered husband that saw my wife as Jesus sees her. And with this new year, I know we make a lot of resolutions or whatever, but I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to build in some time quickly for you. To be able to get away, to get off the grid a little bit, to unplug from everything, so you could be in a position to where God will speak to you and bring home this very thing, that you are poor in spirit. And you need to be poor in spirit. Now, I will plug, we do have a boot camp that a number of men are going to in a few weeks. So I still want to plug that. And here's the reason I plug that for men. Because I are one. All right? And I also understand, because I've tried this at times in my life, to have one of those stay-at-home moments to where, I want to connect with God. I want to get that connection where I can listen to God. But you know what happens when I do one of these staycations with this idea in mind? I keep thinking about things I got to do around the house. I'm going to do this and this and that. I know dudes, that's the way we are. We're thinking about something. We're going to be doing something. It's hard for us to simply sit still before God. So sometimes we need this specific event type thing to get away. So that's why I sort of plugged the boot camp experience for you to do that. You can go to our website and find that information out, by the way. But what about every day? What about every day? See, we need to be renewed in this every day. We need to be renewed and reminded every day that we are poor in spirit. That we are in need of God each and every day. And I think we need to build that into our lives each and every day. We'll find a time and a place where we'll not be disturbed, where we'll not have any distractions. And I realize this. I'm speaking to a vast number of people who have children and teenagers in the house. So when When can you find? That's a dilemma for you. I understand that. That's a dilemma. Why do I get up so early in the morning? Why do I get up at 5 or 5:30? Because nothing's going on. It's quiet. I can have that time. And I got 3 guys holding me accountable, 3 other pastors hold me accountable to that time. When is that for you? When is that for you? I was looking back when I had kids and teenagers and all that stuff, and what about 3 o'clock in the morning? Maybe that's about the best time, maybe? I don't know. So that's on you. And there's no set time. You don't need, I almost said, well, so 2 hours. No, that's not going to work, right? That's not realistic. You just have to set aside a time and a place, literally. Set a time and a place where you know I'm going to be still and I'm going to listen. Because you know what? I am poor in spirit and I need God. I need that connection with God. I need that time alone. Because here's the deal. When I realize that, when I realize that I have a need for God, that I'm poor in spirit, all the rest of these teachings, not the Beatitudes, but the rest of it, it just pops. And I'm able to deal with these in a positive way, and I can understand what it means to live in this life, to have a fulfilled life. Not a life where I'm waiting to heaven to have the greatest thing going on at all. A fulfilled life now. See, if I'm dependent on God, I'm poor in the Spirit now, and I realize that God must do something in my life, then I can do the rest of this. I can live into the rest of what Jesus is saying. He says, be salt of the earth. He says, you need to watch out for your anger. He says, you need to get a hold of lust. You need to turn the other cheek. You need to not only love your enemies, pray for your enemies. You need to give to those who are in need. All these things that he's challenging us to live by, and he's saying that when you live by this way, you will have a fulfilled life. But you can't do it on your own. You need me there with you. You need me there with you. Let me reframe it this way. Poor isn't a good thing, it's a God thing. Being poor in spirit is not about us, it's really about God. Being poor in the Spirit is meaning we let God be God. We yield our lives to Him. We yield our purpose to Him. We yield our future to Him. Tomorrow, next month, next year, and eternity. It's not either or, it's both and. It's both and. We understand. We cannot gain heaven. We can't buy our way into heaven. We are dependent on God. Celebrate Recovery just started their new teaching session. It's a year-long teaching thing. They restarted this past Thursday. What's the first step in the 12-step recovery program? Admit that we are powerless. Admit we are powerless. Blessed are the poor in spirit. When we do that, we start on the road to recovery. We start on the road to freedom. I hope you understand that as believers in Jesus, we're supposed to grow in our faith. We're not supposed to just simply say, Jesus, I believe in you, and that's it. That's our ticket to heaven type thing. That's not what He's called us to do. He's not called us to do that. We're supposed to grow. We cease to grow when we cease to feel our need. We cease to grow when we cease to understand what poor in the Spirit is. Jesus told a story. A Pharisee and a tax collector. They were both in the temple. They were both praying. The Pharisee was looking up to God basically staring him right in the eyes, eye face to face, say, God, you and me are good, right? You and me are good. Now, this tax collector down here who's cheated people most of his life, the only reason he's got anything is because he cheated people. God, I'm glad I'm not like him. You and me are good, right, God? Tax collector, also praying. He can't look at God. His head is bowed. He says, God, have mercy on me. You see, that tax collector understood that he was bankrupt, yet he had more money than he knew what to do with. But he knew he was bankrupt. And what did he say? Jesus said this, I tell you that this man, this tax collector, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Let me rephrase or remind you a little bit about the poor. The poor is a person who is destitute. And it's not a working poor, right? It's a poor in such a way that there's literally nothing they can do. Nothing they can do but rely on someone else. So that's why they are begging. This poor comes with empty hands and empty pockets. They got nothing in there. They come with empty hands and empty pockets because they realize with open hands they can be given something, but they have no way to repay. That's what the poor are. And we are challenged today to come to God that way. We are challenged today to say, God, I come to you with open hands and I have empty pockets because guess what? Everything that you have given me and everything that you will give me, there's no way I can repay you. There's no way. This posture of coming with empty hands is how I would invite you to come today to the Lord's Supper.